Wheatgrass is a common name for many species within the Agrippeiran genus, as well as genera with the same classification. The three primary species referenced in articles about prairies include western wheatgrass, tall wheatgrass, and crested wheatgrass. They are a combination of natural and intentionally introduced species from Eurasia, Eastern Europe, and Western Asia, starting in the 20th century, 1925-1955. The wheatgrass varieties that were introduced were soil-stabilizing, drought-resistant, and ideal for livestock grazing. This was a vital attribute in a semi-arid region such as the Great Plains, for land erosion, overgrazing, and failed harvests were the norm. When these species were introduced, they were regarded as a feasible solution for decreased land deterioration with no regard to long-term consequences. Historical context of prairie modification, 2:35:00. Prior to European intervention, Great Plains were sustained by a naturally occurring disturbance regime of minimal fire and grazing from large mammals such as bison. This disturbance regime provided limited access to dominant plant species and increased plant diversity of prairie ecosystems. Once dominant agricultural systems took over the Great Plains, the naturally occurring disturbance regime shifted. Fires used on purpose, fenced areas, overgrazing, and cropland diminished the health of prairie ecosystems. When prairie soil erosion problems emerged and reduced productivity was observed, wheatgrass was introduced as an ecological management solution to disturbed marginal soils. It was beneficial for ecological stability in areas with excessive erosion. Although this was a good first step for immediate stabilization for growth, it changed the competitive dynamics within native plant communities. Historically, this was deemed an agricultural success story. Government programs and land grant policies championed seeding wheatgrass as a preventative measure on disrupted land and hailed it as an agricultural success. This shows that decisions made over time concerning ecological management were based on economic and sociological factors instead of ecological concerns. Prairie ecology niche partitioning 5:007:30. In a thriving prairie, plants are able to grow together through niche partitioning. They access resources in varying ways and times. For instance, some will sprout earlier in the season, while others will be slow to start. Some will tap into the uppermost regions of the soil for water resources, while others rely on deeper taps. Therefore, with niche partitioning in place, many types of plants can survive without utilizing all resources and outcompeting one another. However, when plants have the ability to utilize more than one niche in time and depth, competition is heightened. Crested wheatgrass can tap into all these niches at the same time and thus has little to offer native populations and reduced plant diversity. For example, it sprouts quite early in the spring and has a quickly developing long root system. This works to its benefit in two ways. It gets moisture in the early spring before natives can get it, and it stabilizes the soil so that those with little early germination efforts cannot take advantage of stabilization to remain competitive. Interspecific competition 7:30:10:00. Research on western and crested wheatgrass suggests intense interspecific competition with a variety of prairie natives. Wheatgrass quickly establishes deep root systems early in the growing season and therefore has access to much of the first layers of soil for water. The growing season is relatively short on the prairie, and being able to access this water first gives it an incredible competitive edge. Therefore, as wheatgrass uses up all the water, adjacent natives struggle to grow, reproduce, and maintain effective lifespans. Within a few growing seasons, wheatgrass becomes so established that it can create almost monoculture patches in areas that are extremely disturbed or manipulated. This is compounded by disturbances, grazing, fire suppression. Natives adapted to seasonal grazing or a seasonal fire cycle are at a disadvantage because it's more likely that wheatgrass will gain an even greater advantage in heavily manipulated areas. Soil moisture shift and transpiration 10:00:12:30. Research conducted in western North Dakota indicates that crested wheatgrass shifts soil moisture movement over the growing season and transpires earlier in the growing season more than other native prairie grasses. While perhaps less soil moisture is lost, it's more a matter of when it's available or not. Plants that need that end-of-season moisture in the soil but are given none are naturally ill-equipped to deal with the situation, thus supporting wheatgrass dominance. This doesn't mean that there is less or more, or at different times, of effective use. It means if there is use, it should be both and not contingent upon how much less or more, or at different times, it's available. This can also change nutrient cycles. If the water is being used up by crested wheatgrass in the earlier part of the season, that means the organic matter is decomposed faster, with cycles of nitrogen and phosphorus eventually favoring crested wheatgrass instead of native growth. Ecosystem changes 12-30-14-30. It's not just competition with established flora that's impacted. Fewer plants mean fewer insects, shifts in soil microbial communities, nutrient cycling and soil generation are impacted. Furthermore, lower biodiversity renders ecosystems less resilient. Crested wheatgrass prairies are less drought-resistant, more susceptible to invasives, less malleable to climate change. These patterns demonstrate how community type and composition are linked to ecosystem function. For example, in a crested wheatgrass area, there may be fewer native butterflies and moths, which decrease the bird species that depend on them for food. In soil, microorganisms are less diverse, which impacts decomposition of detritus that all plants create and reduces nutrients available for all players that need those. Conserve, manage, restore 14-30-17-30. Conservation of wheatgrass did not foresee stability of the steppe as an ecological lapse in the long game, but today, land managers are aware of the benefits and drawbacks of these wheatgrass systems. In the prairie, systems are being restored to more native species, grazing occurs at a different frequency and timing, and fire has been reintroduced where acceptable. Restoration relies on an understanding of root-to-soil dynamics and a long-term mindset instead of one that looks for immediate stabilization. The wheatgrass ecosystem is a great example of learned, adaptive management. Cultural and agricultural significance, 17-30-19-30. Yet aside from ecological problems, wheatgrass became a major cultural force for human enterprise upon the plains. Cultivated wheatgrass by homesteaders and ranchers was a way to promote quick germination and response on disturbed spaces to create pastures for livestock, as well as crested wheatgrass, frequently planted across homesteads and government reclamation lands to stave off soil erosion created by dust bowl winds. Thus, the historical implications here signify how people had to settle for a compromise between agricultural necessity and later ecological consequences. It illustrates how homesteaders and the prairie interacted in ways more and less predictable. Homesteaders often suggest that they saved their pastures from drought with wheatgrass, although the natives weren't as pleased with the results. Similarities, differences of wheatgrass species, 19-30-21-30. Western tall and crested differ in how they grow, how their roots grow, and competition. Western wheatgrass doesn't get as tall, pun intended, grows in a sodded manner, has deeper roots compared to the others, and is more tolerant of low moist conditions. Tall is extremely drought-resistant and found in more semi-arid regions. Crested grows in and takes over quickly from the onset on disturbed land. This makes a difference for projection and management down the line should one of these species assimilate into other ecosystems where it no longer belongs. For instance, a more degraded soil would benefit more from crested quicker than a region that can spare some natural indigenous species.